Okay.
All right. We should all be live. We should be going. So,
Oh, good. I actually have a question.
yeah, go right ahead.
I'll ask a question just leading into your discussion of all this stuff. Um, I heard from like different people and podcasts and things like that that road course races are typically more quote unquote projectable than others. So that's the first thing I wanted to ask you is what you thought of that and how and if that's true, is it over true? In other words, people think that more than whatever. Go into a little bit of. I mean, I have my own thesis about why that could or could not be true or whatever, but talk to me a little bit about that, how that might impact the way you analyze things, and then I might have some questions along the way about other things related to the race. But that's the thing I wanted to kind of lead with before you kind of got into your thing.
So, if we remove, if you look at a race and remove the variance aspect of it, of people wrecking out or whatever, very similar to F1. It's usually easier to predict where people are going to go or where they finish, just due to the lack of laps, due to like the lack of like outside place differential points or finishing points. Like there's only a limited amount of fast laps and laps allowed to go around. Those are typically centered around the people who start up front. The ratio between leading a lap and then also sequentially getting that fast lap is much closer than other tracks. And so like usually those outside elements aren't as being spread out amongst everybody. And typically, since people are scoring, or since people aren't necessarily flying through the field like they would at typical races, it limits the like place differential, like chalk in the back that you need to do, or that has a chance of like truly passing a lot of cars. And so typically, like even sims and stuff for like races like this, they're usually pretty decent, just because there's a lack of just variance in there. Once you throw in people like wrecking out, or if they cause a big wreck, like whatever, then that goes out the window. But like on a foundational level, yes, they are far more projectable than other races.
And would that also mean that chalk is a little harder to fade in these types of races?
Yes. However, what we've been seeing recently, and certainly this year in this car, and recently, is that ownership is usually more spread out at these tracks. So even like, a chalk play, like, I mean, we're used to seeing like, some guys in the 40s, 50s and stuff. Usually the highest one, at least for like this race, I would assume it's going to probably be in like high 30s. I don't think anybody really pushes a threshold that like makes him like uber chalk. I think we see a lot of people spread out in the 20s today. So even then, just because everybody is going to project to be so close together, I don't think there's necessarily like one play that you need to be like overweight on, or like where you have to like eat the chalk or whatever.
You don't think that that Kyle Busch could be 50%?
I don't think so. That's I haven't looked at your stuff yet this morning, but
No,
when
I'm only projecting him right now, ownership
oh,
wise.
okay.
Again, at like 35 or something.
Mhm.
But when I do my actual runs, it's like it's forcing me to play so much of him that I have a feeling that just it's just going to get higher. Just because again, when I first do my runs, it has nothing to do with much of anything except for what's most likely to happen. And what's most likely to happen is he gets into these lineups. So if he's getting into my lineups, then he's probably getting into a lot of people's. And again, we talked about this a couple of times. I mean, the highest owned guys have just been higher owned. You know what I mean? In general. And the reason I bring this up is because, factoring in what you just said, that this tends to be a more projectable type of track and situation. I have a feeling that it's just going to be even higher. No, I don't know. Maybe 50 is too low. Maybe you should play 100% of them. I don't know. But that would be my instinct is that position would be, that Kyle Busch would be particularly high. The thing it's again relative to the track I wanted to ask you is, with these high place differential plays, on the one hand, it seems instinctive to me that it's harder to pass on in these road courses than in other tracks. So it's hard for these guys to weave through the field. But then, I hear about the something's different about the race that what are they going to do? Green flag caution or something that makes place differential a little bit easier to play this week. Again, I hate to obviously steal any of your thunder. I'm just kind of picking up like things I picked up along the way. But yeah, I guess that's where I'm at. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that I did put sheets up, but there's like one guy I haven't really been able to deal with yet, and that's the guy, the RCR guy, the new guy. I'm almost finished with him, but I got to figure out what I want to do with him. That's what's his name?
Brown.
Right.
So I guess sidestepping a little bit before I answer this question. So like entering this race, like this show, because we're doing this, and I want to talk F1 with you after we talk about this for like 40 minutes or whatever. I don't have like any like favorite play at all today. Like I think truly everybody is like viable. I don't think you need to spend all the salary. Like I'm very much just going like at the end of the day, like kind of like, you're bringing up Kyle Busch. Like Busher seems to be my guy that fits everything that you were talking about with what you were thinking that Kyle Busch runs into. But even still, like I imagine my ownership is going to be spread out today, and I typically don't do that a lot. But I envision just having like probably like 55% of like 13 guys or something like that. Like I think that's how I'm going to approach the slate. So I'm very much more open to the line of construction and talk that you kind of focus on today. But going back to place differential and making it harder to pass, et cetera, et cetera. So like this is a very difficult track to pass, and we typically see guys who start up front will remain up front in this race. Now the thing that they're bringing back, or that they've already done a few times this year versus last year, is last year they didn't throw yellows at the stages, and so you didn't have guys purposely pitting right before the end of a stage to gain track position for the sequential restart after the fact, or after that stage would come out. Now they brought those back because NASCAR was like, well, the fans aren't watching, it's not as exciting, and so all that means is that typically guys who are going to be competing for the race end are most likely going to be pitting before those stages. Okay. And the people who, when you start looking at like the NASCAR point standings and stuff like that, people who need points, or if they're looking for like a playoff run or whatever, those people are going to stay out and take the extra points for like the real life standings. But in a fantasy aspect, that's really going to hurt them because they're going to start in the back of the field once they pit under yellow. And so yes, like place differential does have a chance to work today, or like have a higher chance, especially like if save somebody like Chase Briscoe, like he stays out at the end of a stage to like get real life points, where he's gonna come across the line at the end of a stage in like 7th or something. Okay, so like, yeah, sure, he's gone through the field, he's passed people, but once he pits under yellow, then he's just going to be starting in the back of the field again. And so I think that's like, yet again, not to do like my like saying and stuff, but like we can't really project who's going to do that. I mean, we can have an idea, but like focusing on who's going to do that, I think is a bit of a waste of time. It's just going to happen to people if they decide to stay out or whatnot. And so like that's such an important aspect. Like I just don't think we need to worry about it. I think we just need to play, or at least for me, I would want to play the guys who have place differential right off the bat, because all these teams realize that it's difficult to pass here, so they don't want to put themselves in a position to where they have to be in a position to where they can't pass people, or to where it hurts them in this race.
Explain that a little more. So what do you mean you want to play place differential right off the bat? Does that
or not off the bat, like starting position? Like I'd rather focus on guys like in the top half of the field.
Okay. But if you did that, I mean, I mean, like you said, I mean, between Busch and Busher, for example, I mean, you have two guys that are and not to mention Truex. You have guys that are in the 20s that are going to be, between all those three, you're going to have like 100% ownership. Probably all those guys are going to be in the 30s to some degree, right? Between Busch and Truex. So I guess it's even more important, I guess, to get that guy in the top 10 that starts in the top 10 between. I mean, you go through your driver stuff. I would just presume guys like Larson and Reddick and I guess Logano's got the pole. You got to respect that, right? Who do you? who do you like from that first group? Like who? It's funny when Bobby and I do our golf stuff. Like we go through our stuff in the tiers, and then the first thing we say, okay, let's wrap it up. Who's going to win, right? So who's going to win?
So I would lead my. Let me look at my stuff.
And obviously, we have all the disclaimers. I know it's not saying who's going to win, but who's going to win? I mean, who's winning? Are we going to get Ty Gibbs to win at lower ownership? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like who's
so my favorites to compete for the win today would be Logano, Reddick, Larson, Byron, Gibbs, and Chastain. Those are probably, or those are my like the guys that I have projected to finish ahead of or finish up front. Now that's not in sequential order. That's just who I have as the highest finishers today. But even then, like if I look at, so like those are the guys I have up top. But if I look at everybody that I have projected for a top 10 finish, that includes right around like 13 drivers. So that would be like Bell, McDowell, AJ, Gibbs, Chastain, Suarez, Byron, Larson, Elliott, Blaney. So I basically have everybody who starts in the top 12 somewhat competing for the win today. And then outside of that, I have, if you include those drivers I just mentioned, I have 28 drivers projected for a top 20 finish.
Nice.
Okay. And the reason why I think that's important is when we're looking at projections, you're going to see everybody's very, very closely projected. And so it's not, for me, it's not a case of like being contrarian for the sake of being contrarian, but like, I think Truex Jr., I think Hamlin, I think those guys in a tournament aspect are pretty bad plays because I don't have them projected far higher than like say Bubba Wallace or Christopher Bell or like Ty Gibbs from like a point per dollar or not a point per dollar, from a raw fantasy point perspective. And so for me, I don't think ownership is going to be huge. If it is going to be huge, it'll probably be on Truex, probably be on Kyle Busch, probably be on Buescher, probably be on Hamlin in the back of the field. But like, I don't think there's any one aspect that makes those drivers better than anybody else. Like Truex himself has said, Truex has fantastic track history here, and he said it himself. Like he doesn't have the edge anymore since they repaved it. Like he can see himself like not having the advantage that he felt like he had before. And so like, if Truex is saying that, like if him himself is saying that, and usually he's pretty honest when he's talking about that stuff, like I have Truex Day projected for like anywhere from 9th to 12th today. Okay, and so if you're doing that, I mean that's basically a bust from his price point. That's basically, that line is not going to compete with a potential what other lineups would do.
Well, that's what I was getting at when I was asking you who's winning. So you listed like 7-8 guys that you thought could compete for the win. So my next question is, how many of those guys like need the win to be in the optimal? You know what I mean? So because of their price,
I would. Let me look at these prices.
And if so, you probably don't want to play two of them together, right? I mean,
yes. So, I mean, we have this conversation of like, oh, if so-and-so wins, he's going to be optimal. But I would argue that, I mean, it's going to sound like a dumb answer, but I think for a majority of the field, probably for like 28 drivers, like they have to win to be optimal. Probably if you're priced over like 88, like DFS points, et cetera, et cetera. But like Elliott needs, like if Elliott's winning, then he's optimal. If he's not winning, he's not optimal. Same thing with Larson. Same thing with Byron. Like if you're playing somebody who's probably over $8,800, starting in the top 15, so that would be Bell, AJ, Gibbs, Bowman, Larson, Elliott, Reddick, like those guys would have to win to be optimal. And I don't think that if they're like 10K guys, I don't think two of them work together. Let's see. Yeah, so I like, for me, kind of going back to where like salary is for me, like I'm not spending anywhere near the 50,000 a day.
Oh, that's interesting.
I have a lot of my lineups using 4,700, 4,800, like low 49s, because I'm not fitting in like two 10K plus guys. I'm playing a lot of the 8 and 7K range that are starting up front. And because of that, like let me look at my projections lined up salary wise. I just think this is I think this is a very, very fun slate because I think it eliminates a lot of like biases or like any biases that like you and I or anybody building lineups would have. And I think it just even, let me see. Sorry if I'm rambling here, but this is.
What do you mean by that, though? It eliminates any biases that.
So this is okay. This is what I was trying to build here. So this is. I mean, you have you have access to this stuff, or anybody does. But like these are all my projections today, for all the drivers, and clearly I don't have who the driver is or what their price tag is, but this is where everybody falls in line today. And so when I have projections, and typically like even for me, like this is very rare that I don't have somebody or I don't have a few drivers like well ahead of the field. So when I have like, pretty much from the second highest driver to, 10th, it's just separated by 9 points. But when you look at like where my fourth highest driver is to the 15th, that's still another 10 points. Like I have so many people projected to score so similar today. In that situation, like in my opinion, the ownership necessarily doesn't matter. Like I'm not trying to purposely play a low owned play or try to avoid a higher owned play. I mean, personally, I want to be lower owned on tricks and like who I think are going to be or who I think are going to carry ownership. But outside of that, like ownership for me doesn't necessarily matter when everybody's projected this close together. Outside of I just want to kind of get off the more owned guys. But when you start looking at this and you realize, yeah, we have a lot of 10K guys, a lot of 9K guys. Like if you're $9,000, clearly you need, like 45 to hit value. I don't think we're going to necessarily see a lot of people hitting value who are expensive, whereas the people who are in the higher 8s and 7, especially if they're starting up front, have a higher chance to do that. And due to that, yet again, based on where my lineups are, like I'm not using the full salary, and I'm just playing like the people that are, or however, I'm playing lineups to try and fit as many of the higher guys in as possible, or the highest projected guys in as possible today.
Now, and if you do that though, so then you're obviously going to be getting some cheapos, right? So
Yes.
what cheapos do you like here today?
Okay, let me take this back off. So that would be, so since I'm kind of playing very balanced, not purposely, but like the cheapest guy that I'll probably have the most of would actually be Bubba Wallace at $6,500. I'm not really dipping into the 5K range just because a lot of those drivers are starting to back the field and like they're actually slow. When we're looking at how the field is in terms of like speed, let me bring this up. Like this is every lap that they did, but when you look at how close, let me make this a little bit prettier. So this is lap times in seconds, or average lap times in seconds. And I haven't removed all the major laps, but actually, let me take this off. I need to clean this data before I use that. But I'm not going to be using a lot of 5K guys today, just because they start in the back. I think it's very unlikely that they fly up through the field, and I don't think you necessarily need those value guys to come through to play an optimal lineup today with how close I have everybody projected.
Now, is this the type of race and setup where guys get lapped pretty easily, or not really?
If it goes green, I think we could totally see guys at the very back getting lapped, but for the most part, and even then, they're probably going to get their laps back. So I don't think that is going to be an aspect at all. So you could use that as an argument that the value range is in play because everybody is on the lead lap. And it's similar to, super speedway like Talladega or Daytona, that technically everybody is in play because they're all going to be on the lead lap. And if people have issues, like if anybody has an issue, if they go off the track or if they spin out or whatever, like they go from, running 7-2 dead last, and it's very difficult for them to pass through the field. But I don't think we're going to see a lot of side-by-side racing today. I think we're going to spread out, and it should be pretty boring, in my opinion, which is typically good because then you don't worry about chaos, and you don't have to factor that into a lot of stuff.
Yeah, what's his name? I'm so bad with Discord. I don't even know the guy's name. The A Stukas. He and I were talking last week again, and this is something that just comes up every single time. It makes NASCAR so cool. That everybody's just kind of fighting for the same fantasy points. It's not completely a fixed score, but sort of. There are only a certain amount of points you can give away for place positions, only a certain amount you can give away for laps led or whatever it is. And each time someone leads a lap, someone else is not leading a lap. Each time someone, passes someone, that's another guy that's not getting a place differential point. And that's what makes this sport just so cool. And that's why I always think about, not playing too many guys that are fighting for the same points, like together. So, and then we spoke also last week about, I kind of did something by myself last week where, and I was messing around with maybe doing groups.
So actually, before you do that, because I know the context behind this conversation because I'm in the Discord, but can you explain to the people listening and stuff why you guys are having this conversation?
Yeah. Okay. So here's the thing. So I've been very, well versed with the sims and contest sims in all the sports. Okay, since they first started to come out, and the idea of how to use them in particular sports, and there are basically two things that are going on here with simulations. One is some of these sites are actually simulating the event, either the race, the game, whatever it is you're playing. So in the background, they're actually running the race in with their different range of outcomes and projections and whatever, like zillions of times. That's an industry term, by the way, zillions of times. And coming up with a whole distribution of how the race is going to go. Okay, fine. Then the second level of it is what's called contest sims, where what they do is given your lineups, or given what you think or whatever, or given what the lineups are, look like, to compare them to what they think the field is going to play, to get an idea of what lineups have the most leverage. And those are sims also, but those are contest sims. And that kind of creates this field of lineups. And then it compares how your lineups do against it. And the idea really behind running sims, both from a race level and a contest sim level, is you really shouldn't have to make groups. Okay. Because the sims are supposed to, if they're coded right, take that into consideration. That only one guy can win the race, only one guy can finish fourth, only one guy can get a certain dominator points. So when you make these groups, you're not exactly taking advantage of the sims. You're kind of going half-ass. You're kind of getting, well, I want to use the sims for maybe just comparing it to the whatever, but you really shouldn't be doing groups when it comes to, and also run the sims. Because what sims are really supposed to do is just kind of run the groups kind of for you, and then again, compare how those groups and whatever, how those lineups do against certain lineups. So in almost every sport, I never do groups. So last week I figured I would just try to just for the hell of it, see what it was like to actually create groups. And Stu, he correctly pointed out that is kind of like, kind of getting double crossed a little bit because you're not exactly doing it the way you're supposed to. You should either be kind of all in with the way the sims are working or not. And yes, that is true. There's something about the way that these results distribute with NASCAR specifically, because of what I just said about the fixed limit of points. For some reason, it makes me want to do something different, and it makes me want to make groups. And so that's why every week I try to experiment with that type of thing. This week I might not. Last week I did. And what's kind of cool about this whole industry is that nobody knows exactly the right way to play. So,
Mhm.
so that's that was the in part of that conversation last week, and obviously he's super sharp, and pointed out, and what he's been pointing out for like a year now is that it's kind of tough to come to grips with what the Sims are trying to accomplish, and you should either kind of accept them or not accept them or create your own. So, as always, very, very interesting conversation with him. I wish I had more time last week to go through it, but I was in and out. But yeah, so that was that whole conversation.
Yeah, and then, I mean, just real quick before we get back to this, like, it's not only that, and it's then what like post slate, whatever happens, like what is the basis that you're like reviewing your process with? Like if everybody wrecks out, fantasy, like money wise, then it doesn't matter. Like then you lost. But like then you have to go through and be like, oh, if this happens, then my process was right. Oh, if this happens, I was wrong. Like that's not even including the variance part of like NASCAR in general, because it's,
Well,
what
that's the point. Like, how do you analyze your results? Like, and they've been trying. I have to say, like all the sim products have been trying to do post sim analysis of in the long run, how would your lineups have done and whatever. But even that technology is very new, and like you said, it's kind of tough to figure out how you did or how you would have done in the long run if a guy that is 15% to wrecks.
Mhm.
It's tough, and that's also why when I sometimes track results, right, of projection sites and ownership sites of my own or whatever, to kind of gauge how players did relative to their projection is almost stupid. It's almost irrelevant. It is relevant to compare how actual ownership came out relative to your projected ownership, because that's actually just like a fixed number. Like it is what it is,
Mhm.
right? But to say, boy, I projected AJ Allmendinger to score 35 and he came up with two, that's not even remotely relevant.
Mhm.
Because there's going to be, because when you're putting out a median projection, I mean, it's almost never you're
Yeah,
almost never
yeah.
going to land on the median
Uh-huh.
projection. It's like so. Yeah, so I hate to get too into the weeds with that, but that's where we are.
No, I live for those conversations. It's not like, I mean, we haven't really talked about the slate, but I think this just highlights how this slate is. What are you, since I assume that
Yeah,
you've kind
so
of finished your
let's
stuff.
have
So
some fun.
what are you
You want
seeing?
me to share my screen here?
Yeah, yeah. What are you seeing from your
I'll
end?
share
Because
my
I don't
screen.
have any like takes at all for this
Well, and
race.
what's cool about this is that I am going to change everything a little later. I just did by the way kind of a skeleton projection on the W Brown or whatever,
Mhm.
and this is actually kind of interesting. So this is for those that are familiar with my stuff for other sports. This column, the Sheets value score thing, is the number that kind of represents the sum of my projection work, like projection, factoring in possible salary, possible point per dollar. And the reason why I put it up here is because it's sort of like what you just said with respect to how close everybody is. You look at it as far as how close everybody is relative to their fantasy points to see what kind of slate is. I kind of look at this number, and it's more of an art because like I kind of know what this is supposed to look like.
Mhm.
And similar to what you said, in most NASCAR slates, there are like three guys that are like 20 points ahead of everybody else as far as this number.
Mhm. Mhm.
And this week it's just not like that. This week, even it's just even factoring in salary and all that stuff. There's just a lot of dudes. Okay. And this is what I look at for every one of my sports before I even build anything is what should I see? I mean, I would expect to see Bush and Busher, right? No surprise. But then there's a lot of guys that rate really, really similarly, and I'd be very interested to know how that kind of worked out.
Can you
So
go back
yeah,
to that
yeah,
last thing, just because you have more information on the screen than I showed, more so for a teaching
oh,
aspect and stuff.
yeah.
What's more interesting is how closely projected everybody is based on their starting position as well. Like this is also highlighted, at least for me.
And you can filter this,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, everybody has access to this on
yeah,
the sheet if you
yeah.
have. But I just mean it like from a visual aspect. You very easily see how closely projected somebody starting like 9th is compared to like somebody starting 26th or whatever. Like place differential and raw points based on where you're starting is going to be so close today. Like that's why, at least for me, I didn't feel the need to purposely chase place differential. Like I'm not talking like Kyle Busher, but like once you get in like the meat and potatoes from like, you know, your fourth guy to like the 15th, like everybody's projected basically the same.
And it's really funny, thankfully. So if you just look at the top 6 rated by this, fortunately, it does not let you play all these together. So it's 51,000. Otherwise, I would get into trouble. Actually, I wouldn't get in any trouble. Nobody cares. But yeah. So when I run all, okay. So what stage of this is? So let's go back to where I was, and let's just do the straight build, regardless, not using sims at all. Like what would be like the top 50 lineups? Again, this is what's given, right? Given these projections, given this ownership, and this is 4 hours out. This is going to change. There's a couple of other things I came in, like I mentioned. I put in a Will Brown thing for now, which was actually, I'm getting a decent amount of him, but I gave him a projection, which is pretty close to everybody else's, like 20, almost 28 points and about 15% ownership or whatever. I guess that seems pretty reasonable. And when I ran these, it's important to know what we're looking at here. So here's 50 lineups, and if you want to know what we're looking at, this says large slate, and then what you can do is you hit the eyeball here, and it'll tell you how it's ranking them. And this is the internal SaberSim formula that will tell you what this is. And I don't want to get too far into the weeds with this, but a couple of things to highlight is, okay, 0.4 times the sum of my projection. That seems pretty, normal. But then it says 0.6 times the 95th percentile outcome of the lineup. Okay, which is pretty aggressive. I mean, honestly. And then this number, it says plus minus. Why would you have to plus minus? You choose minus 0.3 times the percentage of the average adjusted ownership. Okay, so the point is that what this is ranking is doing is giving you some upside and punishing people to some degree for being too highly owned. Okay? Now, just based on my view, I think they could probably do a little bit more as far as digging ownership, but then again, I'm a little greedier, But and you can change that, okay? But just so you know what, and most people run this stuff and say, okay, these are my lineups without even knowing what they actually are, right? So we're rating them by your top 50 of the 5,000 I created. That's how it's ranking these guys, and I show you this for context. 76% Kyle Busch, 70% Busher, and then 40% Hamlin, 40% Chastain, whatever. Okay, that doesn't, tell the whole story because you don't know who he's actually paired with and all this stuff, So, and then what I will do is normally I would run the sims, and I've already done it, but here's again something that you have to decide when you run these. Okay, so I have the energy engineer in the wind tunnel. You have to decide what field you want to compare yourself to in the first place. Okay. And unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to describe it, SaberSim only gives you really this option as a default. And that's a SaberSim ownership. So it's basically going to just take its own ownership and create its field of lineups based on that. So it's going to create this, 26,117 lineups, including dupes, including everything with based on its own ownership. So you have to decide if you're comfortable with that, right? Because remember, you're comparing your 5,000 to something. So this is an important decision. And if you are going to pick this, you are giving full faith to the SaberSim ownership, okay? Which is, I'm not saying good, better, and different. What you cannot do yet on SaberSim is replace this with your own ownership, okay? It's either SaberSim ownership or something else. One way to get around that, if you want, is you could pick what's called Build 1. Now, what's Build 1? What Build 1 is basically the 5,000 lineups I just created, okay? And that's what build one is. And for you to tell what that is, what build one looks like, what you want to look at is this number, which is pool, because this is the ownership of the entire pool, of lineups that you created. I actually only created, I think, like 1,000 here, so whatever. So that's fine. So if you like this set of ownership, like 30, 27, a little more, then maybe you should go with this one. I happen to think this is way too tight. I think that Bush should be high, will be higher. I would say he should be higher. I think he will be higher, and I think Busher will be higher. So as a result, I'm probably just going to go with the SaberSim ownership. But that is a decision that you need to make, is which one to do. So for the purpose of this, we are going to just use SaberSim ownership. And just to show you, we are going to rerun it just to, again, just show the process. And again, remember what we had before. We had 76% Bush, 70% Busher, or whatever it is. And I just kind of like to see what the difference is.
So, but because I have a question related to this that I don't think I've heard anybody ask you before, especially post content or post you running the Sims and stuff. Because what I do, or at least I'm usually curious about it, like clearly you have your pool of 1,000 lines, and right now you're searching or you're sorting by your top 50
of some ranking system. Yes.
Yes. And clearly, I mean, you're very successful at that. Like, clearly the process is working. But do you ever just not like clearly you can't enter more than 150 lines or whatever on a contest, but do you ever look at like the ownership that changed your personal exposure when it okay, let me think about how to ask this. Do you ever look at how your exposure changes when you open the top lineups from 50 to say like 150, 200? Do you ever pay attention?
And here's the point, right? So this is what I'm saying. So if I were playing 1,000 lineups, this would be my exposure, right? And then, like you said, if I went to, and this happens in baseball a lot. Like in baseball, I will have let's say I'll have like a pool of lineups where I'll have, say, only 10% for a team, but they'll show up in like 80% of my top 50, right? So yes, I don't know exactly what to make of that, except just to say that they're the top lineups. But and you'll find a lot of kind of like mediocre lineups of other teams. Okay, a little bit lower. But like, let's just say that I wanted to do what you said. I'm only playing 50, but instead I wanted to see what my exposure would be in the top 100. I could do that. I just don't know exactly what I would make of that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to say how is it going to help me, but I guess that is the question. Like, how's that going to help me?
So for me personally, the reason I asked that is because for me personally, I tend to remove, like if I run the contest sims for SaberSim, I have tended to start removing the top lineups that they give me based on like the results when I sorted by risk adjusted ROI. I've started removing the top like 6-7 lineups from the lines that I actually play, and I've started going farther down into the lineup specifically for like NBA Showdown and F1. Whenever I do run that stuff for F1, or I just want to see, I've typically found more success when I start looking a bit farther down the line.
Let me give you a little maybe an alternative way to do that. So I see what you're getting at. I mean, you don't want to play what everybody else is playing, right? So you want to I don't say X out or whatever it is, but you want to give a little more credit to the ones that are not projecting near the top. Is that kind of the idea?
Yes, and well, I mean that is what I'm doing. Maybe for a different reason,
right? Right. Yeah. But what I would rather you do. I mean, what I do is I would filter after the fact. So I would not just say, okay, the top ranked one I'm going to get rid of, but I'll filter for different like ownership, like different ownership things. Like,
and I also don't do it because I think that lineup is going to be owned. I have like so my reasoning is because I'm very much into pulling contests post slate and stuff. Those have just tended to be the worst lineups that I end up playing. Like when I'm looking at trying to play, because I play 20 lines in most things, trying to better have a better 20 group of lineups in these in these contests. Typically, the highest ranked ones from SaberSim, I'm not playing them because I think everybody else is playing them. Those have statistically been the worst lineups that I have entered in lineups, and typically those aren't cashing. Now, I don't want to get into the whole discussion of arguing what is cashing, what is a good line, whatever. But what I'm looking for lineups is, finishing either at the top of the contest or last. If you're in like DFS purgatory hell between like 65th percent of the contest and like 17th% of the contest, like I want to avoid that altogether. And I end up seeing those lineups falling right in the middle of that like purgatory when I'm looking at how I want to have lineups perform in DFS. So that is why I have started removing those lineups, just because they have not shown the results that I've been wanting to see due to my own play. And this is, at this point, it's probably been about a year and a half of looking back at that stuff.
Well, that's the question. So again, my opinion is that your observation are probably a little biased and certainly suffer from sample size issues. Unless, again, like you said you've observed for a year and a half, but unless someone's actually like done the data work, and gone back, I wouldn't make a radical change in your process like that. Because remember what you're doing. If you're literally taking out like the top 10 lineups or whatever, because you think that they haven't performed, that's a major change that you're making. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to do that, I would probably do a little more, and I wouldn't know how to do this, right? But I would do a little more actual work on figuring out whether those lineups have actually done as poorly as you think they have. That would be my my counter to that. But yeah, it's always good to like go back and see if you have a good system to analyze your process. Yeah, but before you make any real big changes to it, I would make sure that that's sound, because I do this a lot. I have these like thoughts of like what types of builds and lineups tend to do well for me in certain sports. Mm-hmm. And listen, I'm a human being like everybody else, and I have this weird sense that everything that I think is just based on my biases and what I want to happen, and like, it's a perfect example. Like there were these pitchers that I always feel as though, oh my God, this guy never does well for me. But then I go back and I see the guy won me a GPP and I forgot about it. You know what I mean? So it's human beings are tough, and I'm one of them. So that would be my opinion on that.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. Like, I mean, I brought
up that's the feedback.
I mean, that's
the beautiful part about it.
I've been doing that pretty much, certainly this year more, and at least for me, it got me out of my like really shitty like time I had at the end of last year, where I just couldn't cash in like anything at all. And that was like the change I made. I'm not saying that was the reason. Maybe Variance fell in my favor more, but when I started doing that, that's when I started seeing more lineups being improved on. I guess shortly, really fast. I mean, this is more so like you and I, because we play League of Legends and stuff. Like recently, like during like this week, for example, like I've been doing like 15, 20 lineups in League this week, and the ones that I've ended up tying for first with, and I've seen you up there as well, have been lineups farther down the risk-adjusted ROI than it was like previously. That's just like some observations that I have. Yet again, I might be wrong. I mean, I might not know what I'm talking about. That's just what I've been looking at.
Yeah, we're all sweating League of Legends. We're all watching the Heretics BDS match on this side. But so here's the thing I want to show, right? And this is again, everybody's got their own nerd stuff that they like to do, and this is my thing. Is that so? Here's my exposures without applying the contest sims, and I ran the sims, and I'm all ready to fire it up here. And now I want to see what the difference looks like, and you'll see, that while the top two guys are still the top two guys, it's crunched a little bit, and then these other guys kind of move up, and like I said, I don't know exactly what to make of that. I mean, I can imagine what to make of that. I imagine that Bush and Busher are going to be chalky, so you got to get a little less of them when you apply contest sims. Okay, so that's the way that's going to be. I want to answer this guy's question, just because you joined from NASCAR only, been doing decently. Notice my Saber sim isn't showing the contest sims you are sharing. Any idea why? No. I don't. So put it in the Discord support, and I'm sure that someone can figure it out. It could probably. I'm not even going to speculate about why that could be. But you saw that I had them in there, right? And I have the same Saber sim as everybody else, so you should be able to find them.
And my only thought would be that Dave isn't on the contest sims package for Saber Sim.
It could be, but
I
the
think
other thing is that again, I want to just show everybody how this works. I'll do a different build. So the way I get the contest sims is I have to first put them. I grab them from my lineups. You know what I mean? Like when I put them into my contest files, it gives me that. Like you see in contest, that's where I right click and add contest sims from there. I'm not sure how other people get to that point. But put something in the support, and that's whatever. And again, as far as lineup construction goes, again, this has literally nothing to do with the race, right? Is the next decision you make, and this depends on how many lineups you play, is this button here, this min uniques button. And all this is going to do is make your lineups more diverse. It's going to require you to have, at least two differences between lineups, and remember what you're giving up and what you're gaining, right? So diversity is good in one sense, but then again, you are giving up, the top, not the top lineups, but you're not playing the top 50 anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You're ranked. You're just not. If you're requiring anything else, you're not playing the top 50, like whether it's being min uniques 2, which by the way didn't really change all too much, or if you get into some of this filtering stuff, like, let's say you wanted to add a filter where you only show lineups with, less than a certain salary or something like that. When you do that, and I'm not saying to do that or not to do that, but it certainly is going to, not give you the top 50 anymore, and I guess that's, it's different strokes, different strokes for different folks. So like one thing you could do, by the way, if you wanted to, get off the ownership train a little bit, is this kind of this geo-mean stuff, which I don't really want to get too into here. But you could force like a lower ownership lineup, okay? And I think on a slate like this, I don't think you need to as much, because like you said, I think things are spread out a little bit where you don't need to go too kooky, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, again, here, you want to show these guys how to do that?
Yeah.
So this is actually available on TrueDFS, but I'm not going to get there from that page. This is just a spreadsheet that I have that I actually put just on the site. And what this does is it calculates, well, what geo-mean you need to put into the filter. And what we're trying to figure out is how low owned does your lineup need to be to make sure you don't get duped too much. I guess that's the best way to put it. So we have to fill in these three fields, and this one will calculate automatically. Because it's NASCAR, it's 6 players in every lineup. And how much did we say? 26,117 are players. And let's say we want to limit it to 5 dupes for the hell of it. So this number of 24, that's what you want to put in this filter area here. So let's take min uniques 1 off. So then we'll go add filter, geo-mean, and then put less than, and then we put 24, and then we hit save filter, and it automatically filtered these things out. And as you can see, it does change things a little bit, and so that is, I think, even for you, is maybe a better way than just
arbitrarily going in and just removing.
Give it something to work with mathematically, and I think this is actually a good number for this week if you're going to play this way.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing, again, this is just for me. I see, this is not for Brandon. This is not for Asu. This is not for the guys that really know the drivers back and forth. But for me, I am tending to just not look at who I have. Like after I do this, I'm tending not to say, I look at the right. I'm like, ooh, do I want this lineup? I'm
Yeah.
kind of inclined to just not do that at this point. You know, like, boy, this looks weird. You have the 9, 11, 10, 9, 10, 11, 12, and these guys have 29, 8. I don't have any of the 1, 3, 5. Screw this one. I'm getting rid of this one.
Uh-huh.
I'm not good enough, right?
Yeah.
To do
Which
that. So,
thankfully I have that approach in like everything else. I still have that bias here. Like
yeah, exactly.
I'm absolutely trying to just absolutely not even give a shit about who I'm playing
Yeah, exactly.
anymore.
And I'll tell you this.
Which is insane for people to like even think about. Like you're putting money on people you don't even know who you have. Yeah.
No, no idea who I have. And listen, when you think about it, if you're really for real about believing that it's the process that's most important, you really shouldn't care who you have. I mean, if you want to know the truth. But then again, a part of your process is knowing who you're supposed to have, and you know that's whatever. So I'll just to have something, I am going to save this stuff. But we're going to do this all again later. I have so I have a couple of things I picked up that from I would say from the industry or whatever it is. What about, and again, narrative versus whatever? There are apparently a couple of guys who have a little more familiarity with the track because they participated in like like the tire testing or something like that. Does that mean anything for real, or is that just BS? Or I mean, like, or is it factored in? Or if it does mean something, is it already factored into the price and all that stuff?
I don't think it's factored into the price. We have seen that in the past, this season alone, that if your team or driver has been at a tire test, it has resulted in more success. But I think this track, like if it was an oval or something, I think it's much more important. But I think due to this track, I don't think that is as important. And I'm not necessarily factoring that in as much as I normally do.
Okay. And here's another question. I was thinking of AJ Allmendinger. I'm not just recommending him for whatever you have. This is what I think about him in general. This is the questions I was going to ask you. When it comes to analyzing DFS and analyzing players in all kinds of sports, what SaberSim tries to do mathematically is what people try to do instinctively, and that is to create a difference between two different guys that might have the same median projection, but one of them has a much wider range of outcomes than the other. Okay. One guy has a 40% projection, but he's going to distribute 42, 38, 42, 38, 50, 40, whatever it is. And another guy is going to just have ceiling, crash, ceiling, crash, ceiling. And we know who those guys are in baseball, right? And we know who those guys are in football. And basketball, it's not as easy to get guys like that, whatever it is. And I think of Almendinger, I throw him out because it always seems to me that he's either winning or like he doesn't give an F. You know what I mean? Like, so are there guys like that? I use this slate as an example in this particular slate, or are there guys like that in general? And do you account for that? And who are guys like that in this particular race?
So my two answers to that would be, one, in NASCAR, I actually prefer those drivers.
Well, we all prefer.
I mean, we all do clearly, but like, I mean, like, because some people are like, or maybe some people don't. I don't know. Like, I have a very high risk tolerance, and so like, if I know, like, if it's like a straight 50-50, if the guy's going to do well or not, like, I will chase that all the time. And if he gets a zero, like, whatever, that's just how it goes. So like for me personally, I actually prioritize if it's ever a 1v1. I will always prioritize the wider range of outcomes versus the safer play. But today, let me look at my stuff. I mean, I think today your answers to that would be like Truex, Hamlin, Buescher, and Kyle Busch, because I think they have the biggest range of outcomes on the entire slate for everybody, which is why. Ironically enough, like I just said, I typically prefer them. We usually don't have the ownership on those guys. Like they project out the best. They probably have the best mean projections at the moment because they're starting so far back. But I think they're like looking at their distributions is one thing. But when you, at least for me, when I then look at where the distributions are at, I don't think those guys are straight 50-50 plays. I think honestly, probably 75% of those outcomes are on the lower end of the DFS raw point play for Hamlin Truex, for the place differential guys in this race. And so for me, if I'm looking at like the boom bust guys, I would prioritize the guys who are starting up front, like an H. Allmendinger, Michael McDowell, Ross Chastain, William Byron. Like, certainly their floor is like way, way, way farther less than the other guys, but I think their distribution of outcomes are much more focused on the higher end aspect of that than the lower end. If that answers that question.
Yeah, absolutely. So who is this? Who's this Will Brown guy?
He's from Australia.
Is he like one of those road course specialists, or?
Yeah, well, he's more closer to SVG, who was racing yesterday, who won the Chicago Street Race last year. Just guys from Australia who are wanting to race these cars because they're more similar. I don't even know what I have him projected for on my stuff. Let me look. I have him with 30 points today, if that helps at all.
Who's the guy that was in the road course race? I want to say a couple of months ago. He was really popular. His car was like 7 lengths faster than everybody else, and then he's a young kid, and then they got put all the way to the back, and they try to weave through the field at the end. Who was
in the truck race, right?
Oh, was that what it was?
Yeah,
okay.
it was a truck race. Yeah.
Who was that? Do you remember? What was his name?
Completely went blank. I cannot for the life of me.
You know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, so everything we talked about here is probably how I'm going to approach this slate. Like, I typically don't use the optimizer or like the SaberSim results because I usually hand build a lot. But just due to everybody being as close projection wise, I think I am just going to play the lineups that I end up being given by whatever I end up deciding to do today. I think that's what I'm going to do.
So here's a question. So who, if you like ran your optimals and you got like 30% of X and you looked at him and said, I don't care what my optimals show, I'm not playing this guy, who would that be?
I don't think you can have that today.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't think you can have it. Like, this is where I'm at. This isn't giving anything away, but this is like, I mean, how many lives am I looking at right here?
And then the alternative question is, if you ran your builds and you got 0% of someone, who would those guy you would get 0% of that you would say, I'm not taking 0% of him. I got to have something.
Let me show this first. So, I mean, this might be more than what people are looking at. I think this is my top, when I sorted like my top like 500 lineups today. So I haven't gone through and sorted them, but this is where my stuff is landing me on today. Very much, I guess, chasing the guys starting up front, looking at guys in the 20s. But like when we look at like Busher is the guy that I would be looking at compared to the other people. But like this is kind of where I'm at. And I think this is probably where I'm going to come in line. Like, clearly I got to figure out what 20 I want to run. But people that I'm like would be avoiding would be anybody down here based on my stuff. So that's mainly people starting in the back of the field today.
Someone said they crushed yesterday. Anybody else here crush yesterday? I didn't crush yesterday.
I got so lucky yesterday.
Oh yeah.
I wasn't seeing. I mean, I didn't. I cashed. I got everything back. I had no right doing any of that. I was not making any money the entire day.
What happened? Did the race fall apart at the end?
They had just a gigantic crash.
Oh, really?
Like, they had a historic event. It was.
I figured I got to check it because I actually checked my lineups at some point, like later on in the race, and I was doing fine. I was min cashing in the spotter. I had pretty much break even in the other one with a couple of shots, and then next thing I look back and I cashed for like zero. Pretty much.
Yeah.
I guess something happened.
Do you want to talk about F1 really fast?
I will, but I haven't done anything yet with it. But we can talk about it. Go ahead.
Well, luckily, I mean, kind of, how F1 is.
I'll run a blind sim here, and with their projections. And then yeah, so you can talk about the race, and then I'll see if my thing matches up even closely to what it is.
So I mean, both these races today are really, really fun slates to build for. But this F1 race specifically, I can't think of a slate in the last 2 seasons that this has been going on that it's this wide open.
Ooh,
Because where I'm at, I don't think there's any one person who's like guaranteed to be optimal in whatever way you're looking for it. Because basically, due to qualifying, we've removed Ferrari from the conversation in a constructor discussion.
why is that? Why? What happened?
Because Leclerc and Sainz have qualified outside the top 10. So it's very unlikely that both drivers finish in the top 4. So that removes Ferrari as a constructor of being viable. Max qualified second, Checo qualified 16th. Due to that and Red Bull's constructor pricing, that has removed them from the discussion. And so you have the two constructors that are going to compete to be optimal today are Mercedes and McLaren. Okay. And when we're looking at their prices for these two constructors, McLaren's 11.8, Mercedes is 7,000. Okay. And so certainly if Mercedes is the winning constructor or the one, or it just works in a point per dollar play, you can play any driver. Salary doesn't matter. It does not matter at all. And even if McLaren does it as well, like salary's wide open. I don't think today is 1v1s at all. I think it's very much like 3v3s, drastically different constructions. Like I haven't been able to figure out what I think the chalk build is even going to look like today. And I think there's a real chance you can get a solo winner today in F1, not even like getting that stupid. Like, yeah, like this is. I don't think we see a big train in this slate.
Ooh, then I'm definitely playing.
Yeah, no, that's why I wanted your opinion on it.
Yeah, when I ran my everything just based on Saber Sim ownerships, just running the basic construct or whatever. I personally would be getting like in captain like 70% Russell. That would be, but there's some other guys, and then with the non whatever. Oh my god, I never get to play for Stappen. Wow, getting like 60% for Stappen. I never play him. Wow, this is crazy. And as far as the constructors go, let me just see. Wait, they considered? Yeah, it looks like all the Mercedes, right? So that's how I'd be getting on my first thing or whatever. But you think this could be in wide open?
I think it's very.
I'm psyched.
I think it's very much wide open. I think it's built for you because I think there's so many different ways to build here, and I don't think the meta of entering 50 lineups and only playing 25 and duping yourself to try and make money. I don't think that's viable today at all.
Oh, please let that not win. Yeah. I mean, please let that not win.
That's been so frustrating to see. Although I did
last night in the freaking MMA streets, it was the most volatile card, and I knew it going in. I knew it was going to be extremely high scoring, and all these underdogs had these big shots. And then, like, incredible variance throughout the night. At the end of the day, like 100-person freaking dupe won the hospital. It was so annoying. Oh. It's so annoying. But yeah, I'm definitely in on the F1 thing. So you had one F1 thing. So I would say that Mercedes is going to look to be like really super chalky over there. So who would be your next favorite?
It'd be McLaren. And I think so. Here, I'll show you my stuff since let me get this over here. So the thing for me that drives some people absolutely bonkers is that I make very basic projections for F1. And this is I don't run different things. Like, this is what I build with. I've always done that. And some people like it, some people don't. And when we're just looking at where people are at score wise, I mean, I don't have the salaries are over here, but when I'm looking at what the potential like outcomes of people are, and you look at Russell, Max, and Lando, like what they do is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. What is going to matter is what Lando and Oscar does, what Lewis and Russell do in terms of constructors. Like I would lean towards McLaren being the better constructor, and since they're 11-8, that would mean, let me see. Like that would mean that like the George Russell captain is probably going to be very viable and very popular. But I would actually probably prioritize somebody like Yuki, somebody like Gasly as the captain today with McLaren. I think McLaren, I'm probably going to lean more McLaren drivers and more McLaren builds today. I'm curious. Actually, Astukas just sent me his stuff, but clearly I'm not going to put that on the screen because we'll like compare a lot of the times. I think it's wide open today, and I think So it wasn't Monaco, but I tied for first in the F1 contest before Monaco.
Nice.
Which so far I've done that every season so far, at least twice. That's my first one this year. Just using these like basic projections and just focusing on build wise. Or construction wise rather. Let's see. I haven't even fully dove in. Let me goof around on this end or on this screen. It's like it builds really fast because I haven't. It starts in 2 hours and 25 minutes, so I got plenty of time. Yeah, I mean, I like McLaren constructor. I think we can very easily play. I would probably actually let me just run my stuff in SaberSim. Hold on. All right, let me get this. And due to the fact that, like, I think another thing that makes this interesting is like Sargent. I don't think he even so like when you start looking at like salary for these guys are at. Like I said, we've removed. I've honestly think we've removed Leclerc and Sainz from being used in general because I think they get outscored by people. Whoever wins from Ferrari or whatever teammate beats each other from Ferrari is probably going to score right around like 13 to 15 points. The other one won't be playable. But even like if it's Leclerc at 11-6 at like 13 points, he's not even in play to be used. Stroll is most likely going to get beat by Alonso and or lose position. So like Stroll will probably score like -1 points in this slate. I think Sargent is going to score like -2. I think Ricardo has a real chance of scoring like 1 to 2 points. And so this slate, the reason why it's so wide open is because the only people in the player pool are the like mid-range and like expensive guys outside of the Ferrari dudes. And due to that, like I just think there's so many different combinations today of what we can do. I'm also just waiting for my stuff to finish running. So I guess, I mean, with the fact that we could probably play Max, I guess we could argue that Max would be viable today, or as like one of the guys you could argue would work. But like the fact that Russell in captain and Russell in the driver position have pretty much the exact same percentage of working makes, I mean, that alone makes it an interesting slate because like it's very rare that we have somebody who their percentage of being optimal in the captain position and their being optimal in the driver position is like identical. Like I don't see a way that isn't the case, or that like Russell doesn't work. But am I making sense, or am I just rambling?
No, I mean I'm down for the slate now. I'm totally into this.
But are you kind of seeing that same?
Yeah, well, once I start doing what I'm really going to do, which is I'm really going to geo-mean filter this whole freaking thing, I'm getting all kinds of freaking nonsense.
Yeah.
It's kind of what I love.
I love this slate.
How about the Valtteri Bottas and the captain builds? How are they? How
I'm
are they?
down. I mean, that's that. I always do that. Also, yeah. So like Botas and Joe, one of them are optimal. It doesn't matter who it is. Doesn't matter what. It just whoever finishes in front of each other. Like they will probably be needed in the optimal or argue to be there. So let me see. So
We're definitely going to try to cash for zero in this one.
like I mean, this is the funnest F1 slate I think we've ever had. And it's because it's so stupid. Like the approach can be so dumb.
And this starts before the NASCAR race, right?
Yeah. And it should be done before the NASCAR race too. So you just get to
let's go.
absolutely tilt enter NASCAR when this.
It's a good day for DFS for me because Mrs. Sheets is going into the city to shop with my daughter for a while, and I'm going in later for dinner. So I'm gonna get to do all the afternoon stuff before I have to get out of here. So I'll be able to update projections. I'll be able to watch at least definitely F1 race, probably a decent amount of the NASCAR race, and I'll catch some on the drive-in on the Sirius channel, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and the baseball is going to be doing good. I might miss the NBA tonight though, but we'll see if I can't squeeze something around there. But yeah, I'm gonna get out of here. If you want to keep yapping, it's fine. But I'm gonna get out.
I think I'm pretty much done. I just think these. I mean, both these slates today are probably the most fun from a lineup construction.
Well, I think it's sort of different, right? Because I think that I don't think you have to get too fancy in the first in the NASCAR, right? I mean, because you're not going to get completely jammed.
Mm-hmm.
Where you force some cool shit into the F1, I think you can get rewarded. Yeah, I'm down. All right, good luck, everybody.
All right, man. Good luck. See you later.